What we try to do always is to analyze what are the behaviors, what are their strengths, and from that build the best shape, the best positioning in the pitch according to our principles in order to attack them. I am Martín Cifuentes, and this is the Coach's Voice. Today I will be talking about attacking principles on how to beat a mid-block. It's important in our way of playing because we want to be a dominant team, a team that tries to play attacking football, and we face a lot of teams that are not easy to beat in this mid-block, so we need to have the right dynamics in that moment of the game. First of all, I think that tactics is about the players, and in that sense I try to adapt always to the skills of the players that I have in my team. And second, perhaps the most important thing in football, in my opinion, is the time. Time give us space to play, give us the quality to execute at high level. So that's why I always look for finding the right positioning in the pitch for my players, and that can depend on how the opponent will set their structure, and not only their structure but their behaviors. So it's not the same to play, for instance, here. It's a mid-block set in a 4-5-1, but it can change a lot. We have seen over the last years many times Liverpool, for instance, has been a team that pressing in that way was starting their press with the wingers jumping into the center halves, which that requires some kind of solution to beat that kind of pressure, using a lot the third man, using a lot the 8s and 10s, what we call the attacking midfielders, to make sure that how we create this superiority. But we can face mid-blocks where basically their approach can be different. It might be that the ones starting the pressure is the striker, cutting in one side of the pitch, and then is the wingers or even the attacking midfielders, the ones trying to lock the space. But said that, out of the behaviors of the position, we always try to set the team, at least that's my preferred way to set, in a 4-3-3, where usually the fullbacks could be a little bit more narrow in order to open a space. We really want to stretch the pitch, both in terms of full width, especially with the wingers, and then as well to create this space, this time for our players, to use a lot the striker to pin the backline, to make sure that we stretch the pitch in the depth as much as we can. That hopefully will allow the attacking midfielders to have more time and more space. Second good principle for us is the ball tempo. So basically the pace on how we move the ball from one side to the pitch to the other one, because that's the way to create gaps. Many times what we want to do is to move the ball quick to one side of the pitch to create this shuffle from the position. And now when we are in this situation, what we want is to switch the game as quick as possible to the other side of the pitch in order to accelerate. So we attack with one idea, that is to overload one side of the pitch and then accelerate into the other one. This is a concept that we call the strong to weak. Another principle out of the ball tempo is as well very important for us, the counter movements. So I think that a good way to beat, for instance, a mid-block is to use a lot the second line movements. Sometimes when the striker is spinning, he needs to be aware that there is situations where he can drop in order to create the jump of the center halves, and that creates an opportunity for especially the attacking midfielders, but that can create gaps through the lines that we need to use. Another aspect that is very important for us, at the end, usually we want to make sure that the players are in their best situations, in the best positions, and that's why we want wingers that are in full width and create a lot of 1v1 situations where we know that they have big possibilities or good probabilities to beat the defender. But at the same time, in order to create those situations, we use what we call the side rotations, the white triangles. So the relation between the fullback, the attacking midfielder, and the winger in each side of the pitch is very important for us, because especially when the ball is on this side of the pitch, if this player now is opening his leg and trying to face the game to the other side, this is a good trigger for us, for these three players, to create a rotation. That can be both fullback stretching, the winger coming inside, and then the attacking midfielder dropping. What is important for us is that one is what we call in the base of the play. The other one is in the pocket, ready to stretch and to make these movements in behind the defenders, and the other one provides the width. Sometimes this rotation can be just in between the fullback and the midfielder. So the winger stays, as I said before, because of their skills, stays on the full width waiting. But that, it's always creating a small attraction when this fullback is creating this movement. Now, before they make the switch, even though they have a zonal approach on marking, it will create half a second, 1 second, that for us is very important to be able now to break lines or to create the situation depending on how they jam and if they prioritize to close space inside or space outside. But this rotation is a good tool for us as well in order to beat the pressure. Most of the principles remain the same. What it can change is the structure. For instance, if we play against a team that is, as I said before, is attacking with one striker, it might be that we decide to build with only 2 in the first line, perhaps with the help of the keeper, so we make sure that we have a good superiority to get this ball tempo. But if, for instance, they defend with 2, it might be that in that case, we build up what we call with 3, so we can invert one of the fullbacks, and then perhaps it will be a different structure. Either we play, for instance, with one number 6, depending again on how they want to press, or it might be that we drop together with the 6, one of the midfielders, and then we have a situation where either we can play with a false 9, so we create a box in the middle, still stretching the pitch with the wingers, or that by stretching the winger, the fullback, the winger can come a little bit into the pocket, and then the striker still spinning here. It all depends on the quality of the players. It all depends as well on the skills of those players. And as I said before, perhaps in one game it's better to be wider in the build-up with 3. In other games, perhaps it's much better to be closer, depending on, again, what is the behavior. If we know that the wingers will like to jump, perhaps it's better to be narrow. But if the wingers will be busy with that fullback stretching, perhaps then it's more interesting to stretch both center halves in order to make sure that now, when these strikers probably will try to lock, there is more time for this guy to take a decision on the next step. Well, the first challenge, it might be that, of course, the mid blocks has as well some weaknesses, but perhaps I would say that the main strength of a main block is the compactness. So no matter what is the formation, what is the structure that they use, a good mid block will be very, very compact, which means that if the traction, if finding the third man, if the ball tempo is not good enough, that means that the space is very tight, and then the possibilities for them to counter are quite high. Because still, we want to keep as well that compactness when we have the ball. We want to stretch the backline, but at the same time, when we progress on the pitch, what we want is to make sure that the whole team, a concept that we call the travel together, make sure that we are close enough, because in case we lose the ball, our rest defense is as good as we can, which is a very important part of actually attacking mid blocks. Many of them are teams that have good skills on counter. The space is definitely there, so for us, the fullback, opposite fullback on this narrow position is important that once we progress in one side of the pitch, starts to take a position in order to create what we call the +1 rule. So if this is a picture, for instance, that we are accelerating on the left side, we want always to have one extra player in the rest defense. So if they leave 2, we would like to have one extra player. If they leave 3, we would like to have either the 6 in front, having a mindset to attack, but still having a good position in case we lose the ball, so he can help to create this overload defensively. The most important is the structure and the behaviors of the position. So let's say, for instance, that we face a mid-block that plays with back 5, which now as well is quite common. Sometimes one of the challenges of the back 5 systems is that they tend to drop a lot in the deep block or be very aggressive, almost in a man-man. But those teams that manage to be in a mid-block, usually they will jump a lot with the wingbacks being very aggressive. So it can be as well that they can use one of the number 10s jumping into the center halves, and then they will compensate this by this big shuffle. There is definitely an opportunity in these moments to just attack this zone that for us is what we call the golden zone. So attack always the gap in between the center halves, because those shuffle, even with a very athletic, and that's happening more and more with teams that are playing back 5, they play with very athletic center halves, players that usually have good capacity to cover big spaces. But still, I do believe that against those systems is always a good opportunity, either second lines, either with the diagonals of the strikers, to attack those spaces. And in that sense, small details like attacking from the blind side or attacking, for instance, inverted, so in a way that this pass as well can happen. Not only this movement looking always to the sideline, but as well looking deep. So with hopefully one first contact, we can just get into the box and attack a little bit like this. That's another way to do it. But it's a lot of considerations that it depends a lot. As I said, for me, the tactics are the players. So what we try to do always is to analyze what are the behaviors, what are their strengths, and from that build the best shape, the best positioning in the pitch according to our principles in order to attack them. I think that this role is very important, the striker. So if we get good players that are good at pinning the back line, that are good inside the box, then it's worth to play with them. But sometimes I face situations where perhaps we had players that were very good in between the lines. So the possibility to create an extra overload here, that can affect as well the position of the wingers. Usually I like that my wingers stays full width until the last third, and then they have the capacity to run in behind and attack the space. But it might be that depending on the players, another way to attack is to set the position of those wingers a little bit in between the backline, in between the center half and the fullback, because that allow us to pin back four usually with only two players, which create superiorities all around the pitch. Then the way we attack or we beat the first line, once again, it might depend if they go with two in a clear 4-4-2, or they go more man marking with the six, and then it's the striker who is cutting. But in any case, we are aware that by doing this, we can stretch a little bit more and create good overloads in the middle. Sometimes as well, as I said before, about the wide triangle rotations, this is a good opportunity if we have the right players for the 8 or 10 to drop into these areas. We have seen that for many years, for instance, in Real Madrid with Toni Kroos, with Luka Modric, dropping here in what we call the base, because they are very good playmakers. So they have the capacity to not only break lines in the first moment, but as well to look deep. And this is something that is important in our attacking moment, because we always say to the players, the first pass, if we can look deep, it's great. So if we can do this with one pass, as long as the team has the capacity to travel together, that's a great pass. Not all the players have this capacity and those skills, so that's why sometimes we can find solutions like this one, to drop one of the attacking midfielders if he's more skilled in breaking lines. Real Madrid has been very good over the last years in a sustained way, because they had not only players that were very good to attract the pressure and to be able to break lines once this mid-block was starting some trigger, but at the same time having players like Vini, for instance, or Rodrigo, or the players like Jude, for instance, the last season, attacking from the second lines, that this is definitely something very difficult to defend. Another team that has been doing great, obviously, is City, which I think they had the capacity to adjust the structure in a very dynamic and fluid way from game to game, from situation to situation. We have seen how lately, for instance, De Bruyne is dropping, a solution that is dropping on the side in order to create an overload in one side of the pitch. This is a movement that is not easy to compensate for the position. I think it's a solution that they already used a lot some years ago, and now it's coming back. But then again, for me, football and tactics is about the players. So what City has been doing over the last seasons is just to adapt to the skills of the players they got. Now definitely they have a very dominant center forward that can stretch in behind, that can pin the back line, that can as well be very good at setting and activating second lines. So all these, I think that shows that the best teams have the flexibility and the capacity to adjust the dynamics, not only from game to game, but as well during the game. We developed a lot over the last season. One game where definitely we faced a team that was very good and aggressive on the pressure, and they were very clear on the way of pressing was Leeds. Leeds was using a lot the three at the top in a very aggressive way, usually with the wingers as well, closing the passing lines between the centre half and the fullback. So for us, it was very important how to beat this first line of pressure, because we knew that once they could press and regain, they were very dangerous, because they have a lot of quality still today on the team, and we knew that they were very dangerous on this transition. So for us to make sure that this moment was solved in a proper way was very important. And basically the way was through the third man. That is a concept that is very important in our way of playing. But knowing that the winger usually like to lock this passing line, and the fullbacks actually were a bit ready as well to jam if needed. So that was a very aggressive way of pressing. We knew that it was very important that in that case our number 6, our attacking midfielder in both sides, was very ready to coming a little bit from the blind side, but being ready, trust him, and then bounce either to the fullback in order to create this situation perhaps, but as well sometimes if he was gambling, in order to keep the winger on the full width, in order to jump one press. But this moment, I think that we solved it very well in a game that was solved as well by small edges, but that the team solved in a brilliant way, and that gave us the stability over the minutes to achieve the result that we wanted.